Hello everyone, welcome back. I hope you had an enjoyable break. There was a strong message that the stakeholders need more discussions, and when we come late from a coffee break, this just confirms how important it is to meet, to have a possibility to talk, and hopefully to build future synergies. Now, from the always very intriguing and essential topic of funding, we will be moving to another very key topic for the research infrastructures domain, and this is the topic of access. My name is Milena Dobreva. I will be chairing this session, and I'm absolutely thrilled to present to you three outstanding speakers at our panel. So we have with us today Agnès Robin, who is the head of sector for research infrastructures in the DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission. She has long experience in research infrastructure policy at the European Commission level, and she specializes in the domains of environmental and earth sciences. Before joining the European Commission, she worked in a research department and technological department of an oceanographic research center, which is a nice combination of experiences. She's originally engineer by training, so it's lovely to have her with us today. As you might be aware, there are various activities of the unit which did some surveys on access, and we will hear about this from Agnès. We also have with us Andrew Harrison, who is the Director of Science for the extreme laser infrastructure. This is a very interesting area with a really global leadership role, and he doesn't look like this, but he comes with over 40 years of experience of using and managing facilities for neutrons, synchrotrons, photons, and lasers. Also, hopefully, researchers using all these different technologies. He served as a director in different capacities and CEO within the Institute of Louis Langevin in Grenoble, and he was the CEO of the UK National Synchrotron Facility. So again, a very strong and interesting experience to share with us. And we're also very pleased to have with us James Morris, who is Senior Policy Officer at Science Europe. If you're not familiar with this, this is the Association of Major National Research Funding and Performing Organizations in Europe in the area of research. He leads the work on topics of research culture and also research assessment and research infrastructures. All of them are very essential to connect. He comes with a background in marine and molecular biology, and what is very interesting about his pathway to policy is that actually he used to be a Marie Curie postdoctoral fellow, and he was also a user of research infrastructure. So obviously when we discuss access, the user component comes very strongly into it. A couple of words about myself. To complete these different science domains, I come with a background in digital cultural heritage. I work at the University of Strathclyde, and in my research, I did a lot of work around user studies, what people want to do with cultural heritage. At the moment, I'm a member of the Europeana Association, which is a network of about 4,000 members, which include plenty of users. They're not only researchers, but we have lots of teachers and also general citizens interested in heritage. I'm also a member of the scientific board of DARIA, which I believe you're familiar with, the research infrastructure in digital humanities and arts, and my university is a member of CESAR. So that's our short presentation. Now, this session will have a similar structure as the previous one. It's a sort of a sandwich. We will hear initial thoughts from our panelists. Then we will break out, I believe, in the same rooms, so we will be quicker this time. What's very important is that we again will have about 45 minutes to brainstorm around several questions which were formulated in advance. And then we will come back to complete the session with some feedback, and hopefully we will be able to have a few minutes also to get a proper discussion, because we call this a panel discussion. I think it's good to have the opportunity to really discuss. Now I will give the floor to Agnes to talk to us about the work her sector is doing.
Thank you, Milena, and good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So I'm here as a member of the ESFRI drafting group on access, and I will try to present to you the work that has been done until now. And like Elena mentioned earlier today, it's you get some preliminary results even before ESFRI delegates. So the objective of this ESFRI group was to address one objective of the ERA policy agenda, the famous Action 8 on access, trying to identify the challenge for broader and effective access to research infrastructures, and with the aim to give some recommendation, and also some recommendation on the main orientation to possibly revise the charter of the European Charter on access to research infrastructures. For that, we implemented 2 surveys last spring, and I would like to thank all the infrastructures. There are many here who replied. We had a quite high response rate from research infrastructures, many from the ESFRI project landmarks and the ERICS, the additional ERICS, but also from Horizon 2020 Infra project offering access, as well as a number of national European research infrastructure of national infrastructure of European interest, and in particular in the field of physical science and engineering, where the response rate was really high. So we also had a survey targeting more broader stakeholders. So we sent this survey also to the ERA Forum stakeholders, so beyond the traditional research infrastructure community and the ESFRI, even the ESFRI stakeholder community. And here we had, I would say, mostly the stakeholders closely linked to research infrastructure responded to this survey. So we see a very coherent picture from the stakeholders that are very close to the infrastructure, from the reply from the infrastructure themselves. And also last point, that the survey for the research infrastructure was very detailed. So thanks, because also none of the questions were mandatory. Most of the infrastructure responded to almost all questions, so that was very much appreciated. What is important is why this work is important, because the landscape is evolving, the landscape of research infrastructures, the users, we have new users, infrastructure of new users means new needs, but also the core user community of research infrastructure have new needs, so this need to be captured. Priorities are changing, challenges are changing. We know that the funding streams are a bit complex and also change in time, so that's important to take into account. The difficulty also is that how to put the offer and the demand by the users to have it very coherent. So that's why you can see that the users are written in big, because that's a challenge to really capture who are the users, are the potential new users, how to address their needs, so that's really important. And also, this work, I hope, will help to refine or an incentive for research infrastructure to adapt maybe their access management plan and to cover some additional issue and address new services and better, that was a discussion already earlier this morning, the sustainability. And to some extent, I think that the discussion on access already started in the earlier session. we learn a lot on what are the kind of access offered by the different type of infrastructure, machine, instrument time, or data. So we have the trend by domain, so that's very interesting. Also the access policy, what are excellence driven, it's the main access mode, but we learned that some domains are also going very far with market driven. I think in the health and food and energy, it's the portion of market driven is not neglectable. So that's a lot of very interesting information that we made available at a later stage in a report. We got lots of comments and we got some recommendation, and we have what we try to present now quickly is the main findings about how to address the barriers to effective access. There is a lot on the legal, institutional and financial issues. In particular, a key message was that the need to develop targeted legal guidance, notably on the IPR. It's a high demand on IPR, also on data protection, and even liability of research infrastructure. So legal issue is still something, a call to have better support on this issue. Also the suggestion to possibly have establish a central platform or coordinating entity to disseminate guidance and raise awareness in addition on opportunities provided by infrastructures. Still on an institutional side, and that's mainly from distributed infrastructure, and notably the ERICs, high need to increase visibility and recognition of the distributed infrastructure, recognition at the open level, but also in the national systems, including in the funding scheme. So the difficulty for distributed infrastructure and for example, ERICs to attract and to be eligible for national funding. So not only the national node, but an ERIC as such. It's a high issue, and it has already been raised in the ERIC report and before by the work of the ERIC group. I'm almost there. So you can see a number of other suggestions about technical issues and technology development. You have a long list. Some are really specific to access. Some are more generic to the operation of the infrastructure, but you can see some keywords about technology development and how it is integrated in the infrastructures. Of course, emphasis on remote virtual access. Interoperability remain something to be addressed, fairness and multidisciplinary aspect. Increasingly, environmental footprint of research infrastructure and of the access, big data challenges, skills, training, and also the importance to assess resources related to improving access. On the Open Charter, you have some keywords that should be better covered by, through the revision of the Charter. Open science, data, and fairness of data, digital nature of access should be better covered. A new access mode should be reflected in the Charter, priority-driven or challenge-driven, whatever its name. Some reference to possible crisis access mode, and also existence of some principle on access for training. Also, the need to include in the Charter the latest EU recommendation on values. And here we are speaking in particular on reciprocity and sovereignty. And again, guidance. So we have to find a balance that the Charter remains very generic, not too prescriptive, and should be supported by guidance. That's a recurrent message. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Agnès. This audience here is actually privileged to be among the first people to hear about the emerging findings from the surveys, and this, I hope, gives some ideas for the future the second part of this session, which is the brainstorming. Now it's my pleasure to invite Andrew Harrison to share with us his insights into the topic.
Thank you, Milena, and thank you to the organisers for giving ERF the opportunity to present the views of its members who are nationally funded infrastructures but are open to access internationally across Europe. And we've heard a lot about ERICs, about ESFRIs at this meeting. We shouldn't forget, and actually Roberto Cimino reminded us about this, of the crucial complementary role that these nationally funded infrastructures also play, because collectively, actually, they provide the lion's share of all of the resources of this sort across Europe. But what I think I'm going to present to you, based on the survey of our members, also rings true for all sorts of infrastructures. And I recognise this as someone who's worked for an ESFRI landmark and who has worked also for an ERIC. So what did we find? We find primarily that the nature of access to our research infrastructures has changed a lot over the years, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years. And how has it changed? We find increasing numbers of non-experts. Synchrotrons, for example, used to be the domain of physicists. They're now open to cultural heritage researchers, to engineers, and we should continue to make them open to whatever field finds them relevant. And we find that these people come from yet more diverse domains. There is an increasing demand to solve more complex problems. To give you one example, you don't publish a high-profile paper in structural biology unless you bring to it many different techniques across groups to solve increasingly complex problems. And we see the same sort of phenomenon with the increasing need also to address societal problems, which are not tackled by one facility, one technique, one group alone, are tackled by ecosystems of researchers using collections of infrastructures. And of course, it's been touched on already, there is a greater volume and complexity of data. There's a whole resource issue associated with that. But in this context of access, it's increasingly important to ensure that the data that's produced at one infrastructure is made available, is usable, is interoperable with regard to data provided at other infrastructures. And then actions to be taken, but also noting that where there are actions proposed, there are almost inevitably costs associated. And in going forward, I think we have to identify what are those costs, short, medium, and long term, and who's actually going to support them. So often we see infrastructures set up, and 5 years down the line, we discover there isn't the budget for effective renewal, there isn't the budget to effectively support operations as operations change. So briefly on actions, more non-expert users with more diverse domains need a greater level of technical and scientific expert. It takes a lot more effort to support non-experts, and it also requires an increasing amount of effort to solve more complex problems, many of which need complementary on-site facilities. If you want to tackle building a better battery as a challenge, then almost inevitably you have to provide on-site the facilities to also study the right sort of system, often in situ, in operando, and so forth. We see increasing the demand for more flexible access modes. I mean, actually this happened spontaneously with COVID. Suddenly the research infrastructures were all there, open 24/7, or as long as they could stay operational, to respond to an immediate problem. This is not the only example, however, of an urgent problem that needs an urgent response. And then at the other end of the time domain, as we tackle more complex problems, which are not solved by an experiment, by a campaign of experiments, by a group of people, we need to look at access modes that support these longer-term campaigns rather than having to go through the multiple jeopardy of applying for beam time sequentially. So also supporting longer-term access, again, for communities or ecosystems. We've heard it already, TNA is a challenge, and I think there's a particular issue with transnational access. We all recognise this is a key enabler, it's vital, particularly for new users, for early career users, and for people in countries that perhaps don't have the funds. People tend to say, oh, they only need €1,000 or so. Sometimes that is a really big hurdle. And I think one of the key things with TNA is not just ensuring that it's rolled out where it's needed, but also to have a real look at the diversity of supply of TNA. Individual national facilities in some cases have it built into their budget. Others don't. There's actually, the system in Europe at the moment is chaotic, and I think the first thing is to review what's provided by whom and agree to make this as coherent and appropriately funded as possible. And then finally, back to data, of course, the big challenge is to find the resource to continue to support it in a sustainable manner, and I would argue actually at the moment we don't have a sustainable way of supporting it in a way that scales with the likely demand. But from the point of view of access, the key thing here is to make sure that the data is readily interoperable so that we can combine input from different research groups accessing different facilities to solve yet more complex problems. Thank you.
Thank you. A number of very valuable observations and points, especially on how the user communities diversify and their needs pose new challenges to the infrastructures. Now, it's my pleasure to invite James to share also his point of view.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here speaking with you today. I just want to start by saying that Science Europe, we very much welcome that ERA Action 8 is working towards updating the Charter for Access, and I think this has been such an important reference document. And in light of that and these discussions, I want to briefly touch upon some recommendations from our recent work, and this includes a now long-standing collaboration with the OECD Global Science Forum. So in short, I think 5 points to hopefully provoke discussions. Firstly, thinking about changing access, it's vital to think about current and potential user bases of a research infrastructure. And this might sound simple, but we've heard in our work that it can be quite tricky to keep on top of continual assessment, monitoring, and forecasting of access. And this information can provide really useful insights when thinking about access. For instance, if a research infrastructure is limited in the capacity it can offer, then optimizing access might involve changes to resource management or focusing on other forms of access such as remote or virtual access, or indeed the secondary use of some of the data generated at that facility. And where capacity is not limited, concepts like opening up the user base to new users from new disciplines or new sectors, and this includes industry access, may help to optimize use. A second point, and again, I think this is a simple concept in theory, but it's about the clear and transparent communication of access mechanisms. It should be simple for potential users to find all of the information that they need on how to apply for and to what extent and what to expect from their access projects. And this should include all terms and conditions, including stipulations on things like open science, such as data sharing policies that might come from the infrastructure or from the funder of that infrastructure, and what is available to projects in terms of technical support, guidance, and training. And also if clustered access with other research infrastructure facilities is available, then it would be helpful to have that written up front as well so that the researchers can plan. Point 3, and this is something that's already been mentioned, research infrastructures and funders can think about optimizing infrastructure use by broadening access modes that are available to the community. Merit-based access remains essential, but things like emergency or interdisciplinary access modes can offer flexibility that may be very valuable to the community. Emergency access modes, or I think as Agnès mentioned, crisis access modes, if already prepared, could help with the speed of response when needed. And I think we've learned the value of some of this from the amazing work done by research infrastructures during the COVID pandemic. Number 4, and I want to draw links to other policy initiatives and in ERA actions here, is thinking about the attractiveness of access. So talented people using research infrastructures and developing skills and competencies at them need to be appropriately recognized for these. And also experts who are employed at research infrastructures should be more appropriately valued in our research systems. And here I think there is a link to the Coalition for Advancing Research Assessment and ERA Action 3, which is working towards broadening what we understand as research quality and what activities and contributions to research are important. And also ERA Action 4 on research careers. And this mentions the research profession in its new draft. framework. And Science Europe wants to see all career pathways, including those that have any form of research infrastructure work involved in them, better recognised. And I think by linking these policy initiatives, there's an opportunity to further increase the attractiveness of access to research infrastructures. And finally, I want to link to the topic of funding and to the previous discussion. And I think this is a really important topic for us at Science Europe particularly, and for other funders. And it's about the provision of full life cycle funding and sustainable funding. And I think offering this can help create an environment where research infrastructures are able to innovate around their access provision and provide better opportunities to the research community. And this idea of more complete funding should also include all components of effective access, things like training and technical support, and possibly also travel and accommodation grants. And it might be interesting to try and explore greater coherence in access mechanism modes between nationally and internationally funded research infrastructures. And again, this might help attract new users and make the whole process of access more efficient. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. So now I would like to thank all the panelists for their contributions, and we will go to the second part of this session, where we will break again into 3 groups. Besides our panelists, I want to thank very much also the moderators of these breakout sessions and the rapporteurs from Stress-Free Aid project. So these are Professor Anna Projkova, Peter Wenzel-Kostabel, and Lucia Banki. So now you are already familiar. The groups are the same. The yellow group is down this corridor. The red group stays here. The green group is around the corner. Let's come back together 20 minutes to 1 for a wrap-up and for a discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks.
I was very young when I did my first experiment.
Well, yes, I couldn't believe when you wrote that you have over 40 years of experience. It was difficult.
I was a stagiaire in Global in 1980. As a summer student, that's when I did my first neutron experiment.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
good. Lots of discussion.
Yes. So we are expected, after the wrap-up, which I have to do, we are expected to come if there are any discussion points for a few minutes back to the stage. So just go to back. Okay.
Thank you. I am yes. Yeah. Okay, no, it's fine, yes. By the way, you are from Glasgow? Yeah, but we will ask you. Yeah, yes. Okay. If there is, it would be useful. Thank you. Okay. So you know now how it would work this. So it's the second round of our activities. Anna, you have to go in another room. Apparently we have 40 minutes to address 4 questions, like before. Yeah, I stay here. You have to, you go to the other room, yes. And we have 40 minutes, so is, so Agnes, sorry, no, it's just as the time is so short that is, I don't want to break the discussion. So you know how it works. Then there is the issue is to have your feedback and input regarding the questions. And this has been already introduced, the issue of access, which is critical, actually is the first mission of the infrastructure. And so then the first question is addressing how we manage, how we evaluate the balance, the needs of different user communities. And there's been already mentioned that are different level of expertise, a different level of geographic location, a different level of funding, a different type of levels. So please, some comments, feedback, input to pass, please. So if you circulate the microphone, one is here. Yeah, if you start talking, we start.
Bring again here the experience of synchrotrons, LIPS, and other similar user facilities. When I mean similar, is the way we give access to the users, and there are different kinds. And one very important thing is to maintain the what was mentioned by her, the curiosity-driven access. This is a part that must be maintained because you have to have some time dedicated to anything that may come from the facility. But then there are other things that are the access, more strategic access, in which the instruments should be available for specific fields strategic to the society, to Europe, to the nation, whatever it is. And so, and this part is also to be maintained. And of course, then there is the part of the industry, and sometimes these three parts merge between themselves. And the part of the industry, it was also mentioned by Ed before, the importance of developing models in which the barrier between the SME and the research infrastructure are broken by helping them to have their first access. And this is something that with LIPS is being done as a pilot test, but it's something that should be increased. And not only probably at European level,
but... For the industry, it will be another question after.
Okay, then I will
these
come back to that.
We'll address later.
Okay,
yes.
Thanks.
Okay. Yes, Michael?
So we have been, I mean, it has been mentioned yesterday, but also today already in some sessions, is this transition to remote access. And I'm also talking on behalf also of the e-remote project, where we are looking into this in an interdisciplinary way more closely. And I don't know if we will come to that later, but now if you're talking about different needs. So one aspect that comes with this remote access is that you also need a different kind of skill set of the users themselves, and how to. So one need that arrives with this remote access is that you have different training needs also on behalf of your operational stuff, but also sometimes for the users. And this is, I think, important to factor in.
Claudia?
That's a really good point, and training is an important part for different communities, and connect to what I wanted to bring about this. INSTRUCT is the structural biology, Eric, and we open our doors not only for the structural biology community, but also to the wider community. But the wider community needs different amount of time and amount of support to use the technologies. It's not the same an experienced structural biology using our facility that open it to a less experienced or from a different group. Then this balance between opening your facility to new communities need different funding and different support. And similarly, we are committed, and we understand that is in general the feeling also of the Commission, that we should open our infrastructure globally to outside of Europe. But if we are going to open our infrastructures internationally, this also needs support, and specific support, and also relates to remote access and to the points brought before.
So then, yes, remote access and different types of users, there are needs specific instruments, devoted instruments. That is the point. It's not only a matter of funding, but is also a specific actions. Because it's not everything funding. You can have a limited amount of money, but then if you don't organize correctly, you are not effective. Okay.
Yeah, we have been talking about opening to new users, especially exploiting the interdisciplinarity. And sometimes that is easy to say, we want to reach this, but then reaching actually the users that could actually profit from this interdisciplinarity is not easy. So we have to be able to reach out to these potential scientists that can take advantage of the interdisciplinarity. We have tried that in our labs and we didn't succeed, putting together completely different fields. And I agree on what was said before. If you're opening to unexperienced scientists, then you really have to give all the access. This will result in higher costs. Whereas if you open to experienced scientists, you can give them access to the equipment, they can do part of the test, and then your cost goes down. So different needs, different costs also, and also different ways of reaching out to people.
Yeah, and different model of organizing it then. Yes, and then there is...
CERIC, ERIC, and the IPO-CERIC currently. Now, I think the way to balance and manage the different needs depends on the objectives of the infrastructure, whether the objective is to be open and to satisfy the wider community, or whether it's a national infrastructure and has its own priorities. But also, and here I disagree to some extent, it is related to funding, because if we want the infrastructure to be sustainably funded, we need to meet the expectations of funders. So I think that the funding drives, to some extent, the way in which we manage and balance the different communities. If we need to open to unexperienced users, and this requires more resources and there is a less effective use of time, this will affect the scientific performance. So there needs to be an agreement from funders that there is a trade-off and that they are willing to take this.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think the point made earlier about training. I'm concerned that early career researchers can get sucked into this view that they just send samples and they get results back, and they never actually know how the experiments are done or how the instrumentation is used. I don't think an astronomer can really count themselves as an astronomer if they haven't actually worked a telescope. They can get loads of data, but I think you don't understand the technology needs and some of the science unless you understand that. So I think it's very important that we build in training. For example, we have loads of doctoral training networks. They should be linked to research infrastructures. There should be a much easier mechanism that when you have a doctoral training network and you identify in the doctoral training network that these are the facilities you want to use, that you do not then have to rely on the potluck that some of those early career might get time. There should be a better way of linking up the different European instruments to ensure that this works.
Yes.
Now we serve a huge amount of science. We cannot train everybody to be experts in X-ray science. We have naive user communities from academia and industry. So we're gradually stretching the brand of Synchrotron out of our sort of core mission for expert support because people want the X-ray results. Some techniques are easy. Tomography, you get a picture. Others are less easy. And in stretching that brand, it does come back to funding because we need the funding in order to stretch the brand and provide those added value services that the clients or the users now actually want from our research infrastructures. So it's stretching that beyond simply X-ray data to process data, to an answer, a result. And we can do that, but the funding needs to be there. The InfraServs go in some way in that direction, but only on a very modest scale.
Yes. Yes.
Spec from ERI, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. I support what has been said about the importance of training, especially for junior early career researcher and also for people coming from different disciplines. I think that's really important, and it needs to be fully funded, of course, somehow. But I think I would also want to stress a second element, which I think has been mentioned in the first presentation, which is that the staff that provide the training, that provide the support, need to get recognition somehow for the role they play. So I think that's a really important element as well, that we develop a mechanism by which recognition can be given to the people providing the support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the issue of the career. Yes, please. And then we have to pass to the other question.
Lehmann from FAIR GSI. I just wanted to stress again, which was said in this first round, that the transnational access is important for us, and I think it should be effectively used, because the old system seemed to be easier and now it is split in different branches, and that makes somehow an overhead, which is, I think, not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thanks for input on this point. And then is the second question, still obviously related to access to, in the specific case, to data, that in the Charter for Access and then the present one, there's been a survey and that stressed the issue that the access to data and digital infrastructures is not properly addressed. And so this is something which should be further addressed and then have indication on this type of access. And then there is the issue also on access to industry. That is a critical point that you should analyze. So if you have a feedback on these points, would be very good. Yes. Okay. Let's start from.
On the first point to data, I would say that the charter, the one that we have today, does make some reference in giving access to data. I would say that the main point here is that the data has to be available in a fair way. And that's very easy to say. So I would say that the efforts have to go into the labs to be able to provide fair data. I do agree that the digital infrastructures part is not very well covered. So there I do agree that we have to elaborate more on the charter. On the access to industry, I would say there is a question of two things. One is cost, how much they're paying, and maybe have different levels of co-funding for SMEs and industry, because SMEs have a lower capacity of paying. And then also on industry, the main difference between industry and other kinds of users is on the IP. So there we have to elaborate much more on the IP guidelines, which could be, and that's what we do in our charter, in our access conditions. We developed an annex on IP which applies in different ways to industry and to users that are having access for free.
Yes, please.
Sorry. Is this question, just to be clear, is this just about data infrastructures or about RIs in general for industry access?
RI in general.
RI in general, okay. So on IPR, when we do a quote for industry, it's very clear. IPR belongs to the client. We have one clause. Our quote is 2 pages. For industry, it's really simple. We've benefited recently in tailoring a service at the synchrotron for BASF. They came to us with a challenge. They wanted high throughput X-ray powder diffraction, and we used European Commission support, was absolutely critical to design a service specifically for them. That's now operating. They're sending samples to us every couple of weeks, and it's resulting in a spin-off to support the access mode for the company that will be extended. The main message there is that that was only enabled because we had European Commission support. Without that, the work with BASF would have been incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
Am I on? Yes, I'm on. So I represent a digital infrastructure, so everything we provide is available online, so that's database, software, etc. There is no need to apply for access, so it's also open and free. And you'd think that's great, then people don't need anything really, they don't need to pay to access our services. But actually there's a kind of a learning curve, because if I take the example of our research databases, indeed they were more designed for academic research users. So when it comes to industry use, there's a bit of a learning curve if they haven't been in that academic research world before they went straight to industry. So speaking to them, to our industry users, we realized that what they needed was a bit of hand-holding. It wasn't necessarily training, but what they wanted was some sort of area where they could meet as a group at the pre-competitive stage with the research infrastructure providers to discuss their needs, to basically build their own capacity to use our services, and also make suggestions on how services could be tweaked so that they respond better to the needs of industry. So this is something that can be done. Obviously, we do that in our own time, but they see a lot of value. The industry sees a lot of value in that, and for us, the value is that we get more industry usage out of our services, which leads then to impact.
Thank you. Some other comment on this aspect? Yeah, you again.
Thinking again about the IP in industry, what we do is that often we make the industry pay the full costs of access.
Yeah.
So when they pay the full costs, in that case, the data we generate for them, we don't disclose the data because they have paid the full costs. But we make a clause that we can use the data for our own benefit to further develop our techniques, to further advance on our research methodologies. We do that. However, we also encourage industry to team up with research institutions. And when we do that, there's a possibility of having access for free. But when that happens, then the whole consortia needs to open the data after a given time, which we call the embargo period. And then we can extend the embargo period by several years for the group to deposit a patent, which will allow to exploit the results. But at some point, the data has to be made for free.
Yeah, this I think is common to many infrastructures. Obviously, if it's something that the industry publish, is like any other scientist. If it's proprietary results, then obviously they have to pay, and they are proprietary results. But also I think one of the issues here is also how we make the research infrastructure attractive to the industries, because sometimes they provide services which are unique and which they cannot replicate in-house, because some of the technologies are so advanced that obviously they cannot replicate in-house, even if they are very large companies. So this is, I think, another aspect which need to be addressed. It's not only how we provide services, but how we make SMEs aware of the research infrastructure services, because sometimes SMEs are not even aware of the potentialities of the services. And the other is how it's attractive also to large companies. Okay, let's start from a game that is not...
Briefly, well, at the end of the day, what happened is we should provide services with the minimum effort and with the maximal production. And particularly when the industries are coming to use our research infrastructure, they claim this automatically. Because we are offering technologies at the edge of the art. Sometimes it's very difficult, and in whatever case, we need to train these people. This is a fundamental part of the aspect of, at least at the level we are here. Maybe in 10 years, we don't need to train anybody else. On the other hand, I think this is especially for industry. For the high-level users, we also need to consider that these people, they are smart enough, they have capabilities, and they know how to handle the data. Although we introduce some guidelines and some tools, very simple tools, that they can get the data and they can do whatever they want with the data, quality control and so on. This is a very simple tool, but very useful tool, because not all the users, the scientific users, have the same skill. This is a variety of biodiversity of users. So having minimum tools to handle the data is very useful and very efficient. This is our experience. Thanks.
Okay, you want to make a comment? Yes.
Thanks. Now again to this, the industrial use. You mentioned how can we break the barrier between the industry and the facilities. Of course, we need outreach. We need the meetings. We need to show to them that we are their instruments, and therefore any support also from the European Commission for preparing this, for doing outreach, and also to have people. I mean, all the access is supported by the staff in the facilities. And we need as much extra funding as possible to have to develop this support staff and to give them also, it was mentioned somewhere, the career path for this support staff. And I want to mention another thing. It was mentioned, I was talking about the transnational access for SME, which in this moment is possible only for facilities which are not in the country of the SME, which makes the organization quite complicated. So the transnational access is okay for the users, but it would be also necessary the national access for the SME in their own countries, in their own facilities, supported by the European Commission.
Thank you. Yeah, if you can go on, because we have two other questions. If there is two flash points, and then, but flash. Okay, go ahead, the flash. Yes. Because...
Flashpoint, so working with industry and being attractive. The ESFRI, we're lucky we've got a BizDev industry office that does that, but we also work increasingly with RTOs, like Fraunhofer, CEA, who have trusted networks with industry. We also increasingly work with intermediaries that are small companies that are set up between our RI world and the industrial world, and they can translate the problem and provide the answer to industry. They'll make industry pay for it, but industry are prepared to do that. Often it's not the money that's the problem with industry, it's making sure that they get the answer that they want, and then they'll pay you whatever money that's required.
Yeah, it's on the same lines as what he said. You need to create an environment that is attractive for industry, and that environment is an ecosystem where they can see how they can translate their results into the market, how they can access a community of researchers also and other SMEs that they don't know, that you can offer that connection. And for example, we have living labs also in the GRC, and the connection with the living labs is also a way to test your innovations. Also pre-normative research, because when you do pre-normative research, you're also getting closer to the market, giving access to your innovations.
Okay, thanks. Let's go to the third question that is similar for the funding now, is the access. What would be, what needs to be addressed, included regarding access issues in the next framework to 25-27, work program 25-27, and the framework program 10. So what do you think about? I think we already addressed before, but I think we could elaborate further along these lines of this question. If there are also comments from other people present in the room, that would be good. Try to stimulate input from different positions. But anyhow, don't be shy. This is a very simple question. I think we already addressed before, so it's easy to give some feedback to René, who is supposed to report to the at plenary level? Jana.
Different solutions to the next framework program and next work program, because there's for the next work program regarding the discontinuity and the project-based approach, there's not much to do because Horizon has its own regulation.
Yeah.
And it does not fund operations, it funds projects. For the FP10, there will be a new regulation, which can change also this part. So there's a significantly different approach that can be used, and we are in time to start discussing that, to be well prepared for when the discussions on the next framework program really start.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that obviously there will be a possible major changes in how is structured the funding, the support to the infrastructure, and specifically the support to assets provision. So, yeah, as I said, the work program until 27 is more or less along the lines of what has been now. But framework program, that, I mean, what there are here saying some concept that is apparently seems to go in different direction of what we discussed, we said before. So I don't know, if we have to report, yes, Elena.
Often hear from our research communities is that work program for research infrastructures is good, but it would be also good to have some notions about possibility of access to research infrastructures if we look at Pillar 2. So, for example, in these collaborative research projects, as far as I understand, it's not always covered. So when we speak about the synergies between the financing tools between pillars, it can be useful to mention access to research infrastructures in Pillar 2 when you have particular calls. And by the way, the same in Pillar 3. As far as I understand, it's already mentioned more or less in Marie Curie. If not, then it should be probably mentioned. And in ERC, I think it's possible, but nobody knows. But I think they have something like 10,000.
Is mentioned, but is never implemented in practice.
Yes, so this is something which should be reinforced. But I think for Pillar 2 is very important.
But then there is the issue of Pillar 1, or whatever will be called. That is the point. Yes. Oh, okay, sorry, she was first.
That's just a short comment because we have touched already this subject during the first session today. That's the project-based approach to service provision. That's something when reframing the way how these projects are designed for funding for service provision and TNA, and the way how we are approaching the user communities through this different project is adapted each time. So that's why it is important that there is really long-term vision of these short projects, so how they will be used, their impact, how it will be used, and the offer that we are creating from these projects for the user community is sustainable, so we don't have to rebrand each time a new project and explain different type of how we provide access to these different projects. That's important really to have this sustainability for the projects that are short, but continued in the future, how they will be in the next 2025 and 27 for the first one that came in 2021 and for the framework program as well.
Yeah, there was first you.
Thank you very much. I fully agree with you, Elena. Also, our communities in Germany, they also would like it to be more active in the clusters, collaborating with industry, and we have proposed something in the strategic planning for 25-27, when the different clusters you have cross-cluster collaboration, but also cross-program collaboration. And in this case, we wanted to highlight what that actually, what research infrastructures can bring to each of the clusters. That's one point. The second point about the projects for access to research infrastructures. In the program part of research infrastructures, they are huge. It's really difficult to manage them. So give them more possibilities, financing possibilities, for example, cascading grants, for example, something that could make management a little bit leaner.
Okay, thank you. Claudia?
That's an interesting point, and following the issue a long term, we have a success story in the project utilise that was long enough for the communities in the domain of life science to work together. Research infrastructure need time. Then longer projects could be more applicable to research infrastructure than the 2-year, 3-year project. We need longer time for the infrastructure to work together. And it's great when you have a success story to have a look why it works and why utilise worked, is that we did have that time to work together. And just to reiterate what we discussed earlier on today, transnational funding is crucial, and we needed the infrastructures needed to be able to sustain that important activity and serve our community in the best way, and in particular if we are going to open our facilities to a broader audience.
Thank you. Some other comment, feedback? Michael?
So we have been talking about transnational access, but we have also mentioned projects like ESFRI, where we had this so-called open calls. And this is also, so the transnational access is a really important instrument, but we would also need some more, let's say, some forms of access provision that is also less, let's say, described or less regulated upfront. And this is also something that we see in other projects, like in the CANSERV, where we will now apply these purchasing models, where we will purchase, as research infrastructure hubs, we will purchase services from our access providers, who are not part of the official beneficiaries in the project. And also there, of course, if you then interact with parties, usually you have agreements among them, but still you interact on a different contractual level. And conditions change rapidly also in terms of costs. And in the traditional TNA model, everything was described up front, and then you stuck to that because you were a beneficiary in the project. Yeah? And this is also changing, and this has to be taken account of.
Yeah, with this lump sum system that also, I mean, I don't know, this is something EC issue that might be the cost calculated in a different way on this aspect specifically. So if there are no other points, we go on with the last question that is again related. You see the scheme of the questions are similar. It's just what do you think it would be relevant to be stressed in the landscape analysis related to access to research infrastructure?
Important element is with the more infrastructure added to the landscape, when there are new infrastructure that actually has common services with existing infrastructure already in the landscape, this can create a spirit of collaboration and a working together and a helping, or can create, if not managed properly, a situation of we have two infrastructure doing more or less the same thing, which is not maybe the best use of resources. Then I suppose it's important that if infrastructures are planned where they are in similar fields to existing ESFRI landmark infrastructure, that there is some work to connect them, to have a conversation, to have maybe even projects together, to make sure that we go in the path of collaboration and not in the path of competition, which is not ideal.
Yeah, it's a different situation if our new infrastructure, new projects, and the existing one, because the new project would be discussed, the new ones, in the new roadmap, and in the past in our working group. For example, some of the projects which were applying, they were, I'd say, asked to merge with some existing infrastructure or were not approved on that respect. So the future is in one aspect, but the present one, yeah, one message is doing a landscape analysis or analysis of the services which are provided and the cross-discipline interactions or areas or services, just to stress further and to create a kind of collaborations, and this is an important point. So if there are other comments, because people from another group is coming, okay, yes.
That we start to see is the issue of quality control and quality assurance for services, especially when we're working with industry. It's really, we're always saying it's on the horizon. It's like fusion energy, it's always 50 years away. This is now genuinely getting closer. We're seeing industrial clients saying, I want to use you in April, I want to use you again in November, and I want the guarantee, the knowledge that I'm going to get the same answer. So that level of quality control, we're not used to doing that with academics at the analytical research facilities, and we need to develop that, and European support to push that would be super.
Okay, thanks. Other comments, needs?
Hello.
Yeah? Yes.
So just again, my last comment would be in relation to the travel and subsistence costs for users. That can be a barrier for them to physically access where needed the RIs. And it has been suggested in the past that maybe the RIs themselves should build this into their budgets, which is potentially possible for very large RIs where this access cost is only 2-3% perhaps, but for smaller RIs it may be more difficult. So some recommendations as to whether this should happen or whether it could happen in some sort of co-programmed manner with national funding agencies is a worthwhile discussion point.
So if there are other comments, so then the red group will finish, and I don't wrap up because René will wrap up for all the others, so it's not needed to wrap up twice. So thanks a lot for this very interesting input, and now we'll have input for the other groups. The first session will be one of them.
Ahora van a hacer como lo que comentaron antes los restaurantes, pero no.
Sin micro. Gracias.
Hello? Hello? Can I have a microphone working? Hello? Okay. Can I ask you to take your seats for a few minutes and invite the panel members to come back to the stage? Thank you very much for contributing so much. These were interesting discussions with plenty of valuable points. Now, obviously, we cannot list everything, and the purpose here was to see some of the emerging highlights across the different groups. So, with the help of the chairs and rapporteurs, I came with some of these interesting suggestions, which were discussed. With the first question, which was how to balance and manage the different needs, the selection and the implementation of access for the different user communities. Something which was discussed in the yellow group was that actually the practices of different research infrastructures are quite different. So we have a challenge in how to look from a bird's eye point of view at those different practices. And also one of the issues which was discussed is how are we going to cope with the capabilities of infrastructure, especially digital ones, to deal with the higher loads. I think everyone wants to have more users and to have this issue of how I'm actually managing to provide services. But at the moment, I think we are still in a gray zone where we haven't identified the full potential, how many users actually this infrastructure can attract and for what. What was very interesting from my point of view was that all three groups discussed the bigger need not only to provide guidelines, but also to have more programs, especially for new users, and training opportunities. This is very interesting because it really went into the discussions of all groups. When infrastructures attract new users, though, there is more load on the experts' time, and there is also something which needs to be sort of taught in advance, because we cannot expand the time of people who are already quite busy. One interesting suggestion is that here we have also to pay special attention to attracting students. The students obviously, or many of them are hopefully future researchers and users, so we want to catch them young and train them properly. That's actually a very important point, because when we were discussing that to really become knowledgeable, professional, competent to use the infrastructure, this is a long process of training. And if we manage to build collaborations and attract students early, this actually probably will contribute to more competent users in the future. So now I will go to the second question. If I miss something really important, we can maybe hear about this after this summary. The second question was sort of a complex one, which was looking also into the relationships with the industry and what the charter should be doing, how it should grow and adapt. So there is an opinion that the charter should be on a very high level, but the basic principles should be really defined by the various research infrastructures themselves. The changes in the area of access bring also challenges in funding, and this needs to be analyzed well. It would be good to have a web of people with experience across different institutions for exchanging expertise, so more maybe stakeholder exchange events seem to be needed. There are these, at the moment, borders between using infrastructures for research, industrial uses, and also use of infrastructures for curiosity, so these reflect different types of users. We probably need to break these borders and see how we can deliver across them and maybe offer more meaningful engagement. One suggestion is that this could be done if the infrastructures work with research transfer offices, which are experienced to get into connections with different types of users. And also what was very emphasized is the use of fair data. On the third topic of how should the future work program, the framework program 10 and the work program for 2025-27 address access issues, there were also some good suggestions. One was that the FP10 should concentrate on knowledge sharing, experiences, visits, so more knowledge transfer activities, lessons learned. There was a suggestion that there is a scope to work better with programs funding researchers such as Marie Curie, probably also ERC. Maybe there could be convergences there where grantees would be expected to engage actively with infrastructures, but it needs to be seen how this can be done in practical terms. There was a proposal to think of cascading grants and longer-term projects, but also to think of specific calls which would look at the needs in access of teams, probably interdisciplinary teams, because we want to create these connections between different infrastructures. So this is a suggestion to think about a call which actually concentrates not on the developing the infrastructure, but I would say on the developing of the use cases within specific research tasks. And that is very important also to establish the difference between different regimes and modes. I think we arrived to a stage where we actually have to look how to avoid a sort of a specific digital divide in the domain of research infrastructures. They exist, but maybe some, due to various specific situations, some potential users cannot really benefit from them. Also, an area which is not sufficiently researched is the variety of access attitudes across the different countries. So that's something also which can be explored in the future calls. And the last question looked at any relevant needs which should be highlighted in the landscape analysis report of ESFRI. There is an emphasis on the recognition of the value of access to new users. We heard about this topic earlier. But also here there was an extension that we should look beyond the member countries, maybe new users in other communities as well. There was also emphasis on the cross-disciplinarity, on the necessity to assess when a new infrastructure starts growing, to what extent it overlaps or how it communicates with other existing infrastructures in its own domain of knowledge, so that we avoid overlapping and double sort of funding in different groups for the same activities. There is also a proposal to think of some forum for raising awareness to users what infrastructures exist and what actually they're offering them, maybe establishing road trip sort of events, or some schools where especially maybe early stage researchers could come and learn what is there for them. And I think this is what I got very quickly from the various groups. I was obviously not able to sit in all of them, but I thank very much the rapporteurs and the chairs for their input. If I miss something really important, that's your time to shout and to share. And if we have a few minutes, I would love to invite the panel back if there are any immediate points to discuss. Do we have a few minutes for this? Or everyone is hyper hungry? Anyone from the organizers having an opinion? Okay, so thank you. I heard at least from one group that the summary was good. Well, can I invite really for a few minutes Agnes, Andrew, and James, in case maybe they also want to give a very quick feedback. Maybe you can start, Agnes.
Thanks a lot. It's too early to say what we are going to do in the next work program and the next framework program. I look at my head of unit who is very scared what I might say now. So I'm not going to say much, but we got some clear message. It's not new about this project-based approach, which is not always appropriate. Some issues that has been described on the need to have specific resources and support for the infrastructure when they have new users, new needs, the transition to remote, and how we can help with that, with the skills, the training. So that's something we got the message, and we'll see what we can do. And I'm not going to comment on FP10 and the possibility to have an access program. Yana has already made it, but of course that would be a kind of dream, at least a personal one. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question to Andrew and James would be, after all their experience with access, did they have a wow moment, something new which came to their mind following these different presentations and then the discussion in their groups? Was there something which was a surprise or a new aspect? I think the microphone is coming. Thank you.
I wouldn't say it's a surprise. It was more a confirmation of an evolution of a trend. I think one of the things we've heard is when we look at research infrastructures across Europe, we need to consider the national as well as the ESFRIs in the area. It's the whole landscape that contributes towards research. And I think we also see this evolution towards addressing bigger problems through ecosystems. So I think the way of connecting across RIs and with these larger groups of people is going to be a major part of the way in which we deliver research in the future.
Thank you.
I'd also finally like to say, also we should never lose track of the bedrock of fundamental research here. You don't get applied science until you've actually established science in the first place.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with what was just said about linking national and international access and funding. I think for me, and from listening to the discussion in this group, something that came out was firstly the importance of training. The discussions, I think, highlighted that the more you think about access, the more complex the problem gets. So I think that's something to take forward. And from the two sessions overall, I think there's so many links between the issues of funding and access that they shouldn't be considered separately. We should be having discussions about funding and access together rather than in separation, maybe.
Maybe this could be done in the next forum or sooner rather than the next forum. Any burning questions or comments from the audience at this point? Everyone seems to be satisfied with the discussions. Then there is the time for the lunch break. Thank you very much for your very active participation.